Are we live, Heather?
We are.
All right, okay. Okay, I would like to call to order the meeting of the, actually, do you care which order we go in, Heather?
Let's do the Development Corporation first so we can do executive session at the end of the IDA meeting.
Okay, all right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Development Corporation for November 9th, 2022. Welcome, everybody. And first item, I would do privilege of the floor for both the Development Corporation and the IDA together. And I see some blue cards. I have one, but if you bring them up here, I'll call them out. And I think we have some written comments as well that Heather and I will read into the record. Thank you. First up is Teresa Alt.
First of all, is this now? But didn't you say this is the Tompkins County Development Corporation?
Both.
It's both.
We're getting comment
okay.
for both.
I'm sorry, I don't always hear things. And is the mic on? Yes. Okay. Good. Well, I have spoken both about Cliff Street Retreat and Gateway Lofts in their respective public hearings, so I'm not going to try to repeat that. I just want to end with my conclusion that neither one is about what the city of Ithaca and Tompkins County really need. What is really needed is housing that is affordable to the workforce. And these projects are market, which is just the upper end of the market. And I don't think that it is constructive for the IDA to be subsidizing this kind of project across the board. You know, not speaking more in favor of one or the other. So I urge you to make it your policy to support affordable housing. And yes, it takes some figuring to figure out where the real need is, but we know there's a real need. We know that retail workers, restaurant workers, hotel workers, even teachers and nurses cannot find housing anywhere in the city within walking distance of their jobs or on usable bus routes. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Zachary.
Hi there. I worked for Lincoln Bryan over the summer, who own Ithaca Paddle, if you didn't know, along with Discover Ithaca. And over the summer, we provided paddle boards, kayaks, canoes, Duffy rentals on the inlet. It's one of the cheapest ways to go out and explore Ithaca's beautiful waterfront without the need to, own your own personal vessel. Over the summer, we had a lot of fun. I love the hospitality element of it all, from playing cornhole with guests to recounting their adventures out on the water. We'd have regulars hang out and chat post-paddle. My bosses always shared this interest. They made sure we offered water, dry bags, lockers, dog bowls, and would regularly check in to see if there was anything else we could offer to provide better service to our community. We strive to tailor our space and services to best serve our inlet community. One day, me and a coworker had an idea to host a race around the inlet down at the shop. We planned it out how to best facilitate and put together a pitch to show Lincoln Bryan. They offered assistance in getting permits from the city. Sadly, it was too late to get permission for this year, but next year we're glad to be hosting the first official race around the inlet. I first learned about the Cliff Street project from Brian. He described it as a mixed-use community centered around development. I had no idea what this meant, but he sure seemed excited. He talked about how the commercial units will be an opportunity for small, upcoming local businesses to strive in an environment of growth and community. The community gathering space, which hopes to vitalize and bring a sense of neighborhood to the West End. With Lincoln Bryan at the helm of this operation, I can only see them steering in the direction of largening our community around the West End, and I believe they'll bring some vigorous attitude towards hospitality and community development that I've seen at Paddle Ithaca to the Cliff Street project. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, George Morse.
I'm going to try to do this quickly. I'm going to wear a few hats. I am the construction manager representing the Cliff Street Retreat. My resume has been handed out. I am qualified to do this bill. And what I wanted to say is there's been some question about whether this would be a publicly bid or a bid project. And I will tell you that's what I do for a living. And to guarantee the best project there, we will ask everybody in the community that's qualified to bid this project. And Todd, I will turn to you and say, give us your 4 best project local. We'll be glad to take their names. That's what I've always done, whether it be a not-for-profit project or a public. The other thing I'd like to say, we handed around, the Cliff Street Retreat is putting together a makers market that's going to take place December 17th and 18th. There'll be 40 vendors from around Tompkins County and Central New York. We are not, as the retreat, charging for this event. It will be open to the public. The promoters are charging to handle the marketing expense and food and beverage. This will be quite an event. It has been scheduled around the other events taking place in Ithaca and Tompkins County so we don't harm them. But it's going to be a great event, and it's going to be a foreshadowing of what the Cliff Street Retreat is all about. And so I hope you'll consider the translation of what these tax incentives do, give the ability for a startup company like Discover Ithaca or the retail outfit to carry forth a mission to bring in people that can actually start up a business. The tax incentives are not handed to rich developers. In a commercial mixed use, they're handed to right as a tenancy, a pass-through right to the tenancy. And that you have to understand what the mission, I know everybody at this table knows this, but the world doesn't. And so we're hoping that Discover Ithaca will reap the benefit as the 30% occupier of Cliff Street Retreat, that these incentives are there to help a company that Brian spent $80,000 to make $20,000 this year to reinforce and create Paddle Ithaca. It works, but it takes time, and that's what this organization was born to do. And I'm just asking for your help. Thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Brian Paulson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Paulson. I'll try to make this even more brief than my partner Link did. So both Link and Zach talked about how we're always trying to come up with ideas for things that will engage with the community and be fun. So he's talked about the race around the inlet island. You may be familiar with the Finger Lakes boat show that we had at the Cliff Street Retreat. We're also gearing up for the Makers Market, as Link mentioned, and what isn't publicly available information yet is that we're thinking about doing a paddle market, whether it's a paddle expedition where people come and they learn where to go paddle along the canal or in central New York, or they just want to come and get some expertise on the best equipment for their lifestyle and what kind of paddling they want to do. We're going to bring together a bunch of the community players that I've gotten to meet my first year as a partner at Paddle Ithaca, and Link is known for a while, but it's all centered around bringing the community together and building friendships and relationships in ways that aren't competitive and ostracizing other businesses so that we can make a bunch of money. It's about bringing people together and getting outdoors and exploring the best that Ithaca has to offer. So stay tuned for that. We don't have any dates or specifics planned yet, but it's along the same lines of everything that's been going on at Cliff Street. And it'll be paddle, water, and outdoor recreation related. That's what we're all about. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the room who wishes to address the IDA or the Development Corporation? We do have some written comments, and Heather, I would tag team with you in reading these into the record. The first is from AccuFab. Dear IDA Board, I'm writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street, adding a development that brings approximately 190 new residents and thousands of square feet of retail space. The City of Ithaca needs middle-income housing downtown, and this underutilized area could continue to be built into a thriving neighborhood with integrated small business. The project's proximity to local business is a plus for prospective tenants. The mixed-use model has been started on Cherry Street. It makes sense to continue. Thank you, Michael Masters, AccuFab.
Dear IDA Board, I'm writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. Adding a development that brings almost 200 new and diverse residents will make a huge impact on the viability of the neighborhood. Our business would benefit from having additional people living and working so close by. The future success of the area depends on transformative projects like 132 Cherry Street. Thank you. Darren Gardner, Performance RX, 241 Cherry Street.
And dear IDA Board, I am writing in support of a CTAP 10-year tax abatement for The Hive, a proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. As the developer of Ithaca Art House at 130 Cherry Street, we would welcome additional housing and retail added to the area. The Hive will help transform the neighborhood in a positive way by bringing more residents and commercial options, as well as a new vibrancy to the area. We see this development as a vital part in the future growth of the neighborhood. Thank you, Rick Manzardo, Vecino Group.
Dear IAED Board, I'm writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. As a long-term area resident and business owner, as well as someone who is looking to possibly invest into the neighborhood and create up to 100 additional high-quality engineering and manufacturing jobs, I would be ecstatic to see quality housing and retail added to the area. 132 Cherry will help transform the neighborhood in a positive way. The project will bring a new vibrancy with all the people living and working within it. We see this building as one of hopefully many more to come. Best regards, Frank Lomax, PhD, PE, Managing Partner, Headwater Solutions, LLC.
Dear IDA Board, I am writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street, adding a development that brings approximately 200 new residents and retail space. This will help transform the neighborhood in a big way. The City of Ithaca needs desperately housing downtown, and this is an underutilized area that could eventually become a thriving neighborhood. The project is located in an area that is ideal for housing. There would be a huge impact on our business and the surrounding community as a whole. John Mitchell, Austin's Helping Hands, 226 Cecil Malone Drive.
Dear IDA Board, I am writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. Adding a development that brings almost 200 new and diverse residents will make a huge impact on the viability of the neighborhood. Our business would benefit from having additional people living and working so close by. The future success of the area depends on transformative projects like 132 Cherry Street. Thank you. Tim Paulson, Palace Fitness, 241 Cherry Street.
Dear IDA Board, I am writing in support of the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. The neighborhood has been plagued with crime over the last few years and has deteriorated tremendously in terms of safety. Adding a development that brings almost 200 new and diverse residents will have a huge impact on transforming the neighborhood into what it could and should become. I hope you will see the value in adding this building, which would anchor the neighborhood. Thank you, Francis Palangeli, owner, Alley Attic Storage, 233 Cecil Malone Drive.
Dear members of the IAED Board, I'm writing in support of a tax abatement for the proposed mixed-use development at 132 Cherry Street. Adding a development that brings that brings approximately 190 new residents will help transform the neighborhood in a positive way. The city of Ithaca needs housing downtown to help with the housing crisis. This is an underutilized area that I believe could eventually become a diverse and thriving neighborhood. The project is located in an area that is ideal for walkability, is several blocks from Wegmans, and is on a direct bus route for TCAT. The project is an important anchor to revitalizing this part of our city. I'm fully aware that the tax abatement the project is seeking is significant to its financial viability and believe it worthy of this assistance. I appreciate your consideration. Jerry Dietz, owner of 124 Brindley Street.
Okay. I believe those are all the comments. We have some other submissions that I think were already just given to everybody, so you have those. Okay. Is there anybody else who wishes to address the IDA or the Development Corporation? Seeing none, I'd move along on the agenda. And on additions to the agenda, Rick, you had an item?
Yeah, just a follow-up from last month when I said we were going to be discussing the turnover of the treasurer's duties, or my duties as the bookkeeper for the IDA, and the consensus was that we didn't want to let the board do it for the treasurer unless you've changed your mind, and the other options would be to hand it over to Ina and Heather, and they didn't really have a desire to launch down that path. And this is during the interim period until such a time as when the county appoints a replacement finance director as I retire at the end of this month. So it was agreed that we would pass it on to the Deputy Director of Finance, which is Drew Brayman. Most of you know him or have seen him about. He's been with us for about 3 years, and he's familiar with, or will become familiar with, the check writing process that we use for the IDA and the TCDC. And I wanted to bring him first to introduce him to you and let you get to meet him. And although there is no formal action needed of the board to do this, I just wanted to get the group's consensus opinion if that's still the direction you want to go, because I'll be turning the bookkeeping over to Drew until such a time as a finance director is appointed. So if you have questions for us, what it involves, or what Drew does for the county, or any of those things, we're both here to answer your questions.
Anybody?
I think it's a great transition.
Yeah. And Rick, as you're stepping on to other opportunities, I wanted to say thank you for all your help to the IDA and the Development Corporation over many years. So, yeah.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the thank you from Heather and Ina. And that was very, very nice, very sweet. I really loved working with them over the last 9.5 years. And I leave you in good hands with Drew. And like I said, if there's anything that comes up between now and then, say like year end, I believe that we're all caught up with every expense, every check that I normally write, I've written for the whole fiscal year, unless something comes up that I don't know about, or that, you know, anything could happen. Deposits can still be sent over or brought over. Instead of giving it to me, you give it to Drew. I have 2 in the Treasury Department that know how to deposit those funds. And so that will work out very smoothly. I don't see any hitches or anything to be alarmed about, other than that it would have been nice to have handed this over to the next finance director in person. And I'll not change anything on the banking accounts at this point, because the way it's set up is that Rich Johns signs all checks over $4,000 for the IDA, and I sign the smaller ones. They only require 1 signature per check. At this point going forward, we'll just ask Rich John to sign all checks, regardless of the amount, if there are any.
Okay. John?
I just wanted to briefly say thank you for your service, and that the ability to have confidence in the financial controls of an organization and the professionalism with which our financial statements are prepared, and all of these things is something that's perhaps profoundly valuable and often underappreciated. And I think that we've really benefited a lot from your service, and I wish you well on a much-deserved retirement, and just thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay.
And our auditors, the county's auditors, are the same as the IDA auditors, and Drew is vastly familiar with working with that whole team on your audit and the 4 other audits that we do every single year. So there will be a great continuity with the audit professionals that provide service to you for this next year going forward.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right, let's keep moving. Heather.
I just heard from Mike Sigler his sincere apologies that he's running a little bit late from another meeting. He should be here in about 10 or 15 minutes.
Yeah, well, he sent me a text as well.
Oh, good.
He's on the way. So we will have a full complement as we had hoped to. In the meantime, we should proceed to the business of the Development Corporation, which is the item, the TCDC Public Meeting Video Conference Policy. And just for some background, with the pandemic, there were emergency orders from New York State that allowed meetings to be conducted remotely, and those were lifted, but there have been some changes that allow us to have some flexibility when people are sick or unavailable due to emergency to actually participate in public meetings remotely. But you have to have the policy. And we ran into a situation where we didn't have everybody able to vote on an important matter, and we thought it was important to make sure we did everything we could to have everybody participating on the IDA and stating their opinions. So that's the purpose of this policy. Heather, do you want to say anything further to introduce it?
Just that the governance committee of the IDA did meet. They reviewed the policy with the attorney present, made some minor modifications, and so this is the policy. We have made the policy the same for the IDA and the Development Corporation. So it does allow for opportunity under extenuating circumstances that are defined in the policy for members to attend via video conference. If it's in a public setting where the public can be present, then they would count towards quorum and be able to vote. If it's in a private setting where the public would not be able to attend with that other person, they would not count towards quorum. However, they would be able to vote, and that's really guided by public officers law.
John.
I have some questions about, in the specific circumstances that came up for us, somebody had COVID. I don't know that they were under direct orders from a doctor not to attend an in-person meeting, but clearly it was a good idea for them not to attend an in-person meeting and get us all sick. I'm curious if there's is that actually required by state law? Or are we asking people to present a doctor's notice? It feels like a bit perhaps like middle school. To have a doctor's note and not to expect our members to be able to just say, hey, I shouldn't be there so I don't get anybody else sick.
The Section 4E covers other extenuating circumstances. So, of course, there's some wiggle in there where we would require a doctor's note.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. I would like the...
Yeah, and John,
Yeah.
I'll be very brief. There's no this is obviously new territory for all of us. And so there's no bright line rule as to what constitutes an extenuating circumstance. So I think we just kind of have to look at each individual's reason for not being able to participate.
Yeah, certainly. I was going to add that over the course of my sitting as chair, we've had great attendance. When I first started on the IDA, we did have some members that only attended sporadically, and it really did impact the ability of us to make good decisions, I think, in a timely manner. But that has not been an issue. And I'm very grateful for all of you making such efforts to be here, and I know Mike is on the way. But I would like us to take have some semblance of an honor system, that if you're sick, you tell us you're sick. I'm not going to be looking for a doctor's note. I don't think we need to do that. But, okay. Could I get a motion to put this on the floor? John moves, Todd seconds. Further discussion?
I have more questions if.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Time.
To understand, basically, it sounds like, if I'm understanding this correctly, that if a member indicates that they're not going to be able to attend in person, then you would set up essentially a Zoom link for them. And at that time, you would also make that Zoom link available to the general public to participate. So this creates, if a member doesn't come in person, then an opportunity for the public to participate somehow, or view on Zoom or something?
No, if the person cannot physically attend, but can attend in another location that can be made available to the public, a physical location, then we would notify on our website that, they can attend in 2 different locations.
I see.
For example, the ST8 Regional Planning Board recently had a meeting in Owego and Binghamton, and we were linked.
Very cool.
However, if the member is not able to be in another public location that the public can attend, we would provide a Zoom link for that member. I'm pointing at Shauna, but I don't know why. It's not because of last month. But we would not then provide the Zoom link to the general public.
And I note that if somebody is sick and unable to, well, they could go to a public place, but that would be pretty bad. Right. They can't count towards quorum, but they can still vote. So and New York State in its wisdom made that distinction. I don't quite understand why, but this is the state we live in.
And so that also applies to the 72 hours notice. That's if we're in multiple locations, not, in the case somebody calls you.
As far in advance as practicably possible.
Right. And I don't know, I guess I would personally like to see us actually change 4B just to specify, communicable illness or direct orders from a physician. But I could see just leaving it be and letting it fall under the other, but it feels like, as a matter of policy, if you have a communicable illness, you shouldn't come to our meeting. And stating that explicitly actually feels important to me. Russ, can you tell me if you feel like that's a bad idea?
No, I don't think it's a bad idea. And like I said, there's no bright line rule at this point, given how new this is. But as Rich pointed out, I don't think we need to have doctor's notes.
Right.
I think you take at face value. If there's a member that is ill and unable to attend and wants to participate remotely, we can accommodate that.
Okay.
But if the board wants to have more stringent rules, that's okay too.
So I'd like to just amend my motion then to move it subject to a modification to 4B, by which it would state communicable illness or illness by which they are under direct orders from a doctor to not attend in-person meetings.
Yeah.
All right. Is that friendly to the mover and seconder?
Seconded. I moved.
And does anybody object to that amendment? All right. I suggest we move forward the policy as amended then. Any further discussion, questions regarding the policy? Are we ready to vote? I will call the roll. Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that passes. Okay. And let's keep moving. Chair's report. I do not have a chair's report for the Development Corporation. Is there a staff report, Heather?
Staff report. No staff report for the Development Corporation.
All right, we have minutes from October 12th, 2022. Could I get a motion to put those on the floor? Jeff moves, John seconds. Questions or comments on the minutes? Ready to vote? Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right. Any further business to come before the Development Corporation? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. So moved. Okay. All in favor? We are adjourned. And I would like to call to order the meeting of the Tompkins County Industrial Development Agency for November 9th, 2022. We have received comments and privilege of the floor. If anybody has come in later that wishes to address the IDA, seeing none. Any additions or changes to the agenda? John?
Can I propose that we handle the video conference policy at the top of this agenda just to get it out of the way?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay, I'd like to move it subject to the same amendment I made to the TCDC proposal.
Right. Is there a second? Jeff seconds. Further discussion? We fully discussed this issue. Are we ready to vote? Seeing that, Shauna?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Rich?
Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes. Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that applies to the meetings of the Industrial Development Agency as well. Any other additions or changes to the agenda? First item of business then is the Cliff Street Retreat final approval.
So I need to recuse myself on.
Okay, we'll give you a moment to step away. And could I get a motion to put this on the floor? Mike moves. Faith seconds. All right. Questions, comments, discussion? Heather?
I just want to add that you have at your seats, we passed out an email from Monk Pankow clarifying or restating his business affiliation as a women-owned business with New York State and the federal government. And in your packet, you have an authorizing resolution for this project.
All right. Does anybody wish to speak to the resolution? I will certainly go on record in support of this proposed development. The building on Cliff Street is at this point empty, and it would be, I don't see an alternative use that would be in the works for a long period of time. This would be essentially at its present taxable value rather than improved. There's certainly energy improvements that will come from this. There's absolutely benefits to our tourism in the county as a result. I think there's some innovative ideas about the housing that would be added here to our stock, both short and long term. And it seems to hit a lot of what we need in this community. I know one of the speakers at our public comment was saying we should really only focus on affordable housing projects, and we do, but I'm not sure this would be an appropriate site for affordable housing. And in any event, every indication we have is that we are deficient in housing at all income levels across the spectrum. I don't see anything in approving this project that detracts from our consideration of other projects. And in fact, the payment into the Community Housing Development Fund from this project would help facilitate that affordable housing to occur. I fear that if we don't approve this project, we will have a derelict property for a long time to come that will not create any local jobs, certainly construction jobs, but any long-term jobs, and we won't have the benefit of what housing it does provide. Thanks. Anybody else wish to speak? John?
I just want to make sure that we clarify before we vote, and it's documented in the minutes, this project does intend to make the payment of the Community Housing Development Fund at closing pursuant to our policy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to admit that this one is, I think, perhaps a little bit challenging for me, but I think that I've decided to support this project ultimately because, I think that I agree with many of Rich's points. I think that the local development team is of value. I think the developer's commitment to bid the project outside of, the partners is critical. In compliance with our policy, the payment to the Community Housing Development Fund. And also, I feel that prior to our last meeting, having not heard from specifically the members of council whose district the project is in, I was perhaps less certain about the support from the city and the variation from our policy. I think that, looking at our agenda, we have another project that's a variation from our policy here, and I'm nervous about that, but I don't think that this is the hill to die on that one, so I plan to vote in support of this project.
Okay, anybody else who wishes to be heard? Todd?
Yeah, I like all the talks we heard about the Discover Ithaca, all the stuff they're doing with the paddle, the boats and everything. That sounds fantastic. The only concern I have is it being outside the CTAP parameters. If we allow this, it's a big concern with that. I'm worried that we're opening a floodgate to other problems that can come out of it. We got the boundaries. I just want to stay within the boundaries, so I'm leaning toward that way as far as not granting it. But even though I think it would be a good outcome, and also with the housing costs, with the when we talk about affordable housing and stuff there, some of the people that spoke up brought up some good points about the people that would be working there wouldn't be able to afford to live there, and it is something that sticks in my head. But
Shauna.
Yeah, so I actually think this is a really good project. I really appreciate the boat rentals being right there. I think they're very popular. The concern I have is the luxury apartments and the luxury hotel, or the small rooms that they're going to have available for a lot of money. And I just don't think that this is something that we want to provide a tax abatement to. So I will be voting against this.
Okay. Heather?
I'd like to just point of clarification on the IDA's policy. Our uniform tax exemption policy does provide for commercial retail projects anywhere in Tompkins County if there's a letter of support from the home municipality. And while it is outside of CTAP, I used the CTAP incentive structure because that's really the only other place within our UTEP that we allow for commercial retail and mixed-use projects. So it is allowable under the IDA's UTEP. I would also like to point out that within the CTAP, housing projects and mixed-use projects are allowable. They don't need to be affordable. And the reason, I've been working with the IDA for a very long time, the reason that the IDA has deliberately incentivized both market and affordable housing projects is because there is a housing needs assessment and a housing study that shows that, our vacancy rates are under 5%, particularly in the city of Ithaca, and it's an untenable situation. The housing needs assessment at the county has indicated for many years that there's a need for housing at every type, level, income to support everybody in our community, and that's some of the background about why the IDA does that. In order to receive the financial need incentive, there is a full review of the pro forma and the financials on the project. While they are charging market rents that the market will bear, and we have seen that with every new project has been 100% full nearly before they've opened. While the market will bear those rents, and those are the rents that they're charging, the financials are still very slim, and for someone to invest $20 or $40 million into a project, there needs to be at least a minimal return on investment. So, that financial need bumps up the incentive level just a little bit.
Okay. John?
And I think, really my concern, I think I agree with everything you just said, for at least the vast majority of it, we've seen that projects in college town seem to consistently go without the incentives. It's my impression, speaking as someone who actually is personally doing this investment math from time to time, that perhaps our allowance for return on investment, specifically being focused on cash return after debt service and allowing up to a 10% return that doesn't, calculate in the IRR or, other forms of developer sort of profitability, the appreciation of the structure over time, and the portion of profit that's the principal balance payments on the debt service. I think, if anything, it's our policy is perhaps a little bit more generous than it needs to be around those. I don't think that applies to this project, which is why I'll support it. But I have my concern really around our variation from policy or working outside the CTAP boundary is that I think that we don't want to open the floodgates to get things like college town projects that will certainly go on their own. The primary reason for us to do these abatements is the but-for argument, saying essentially that this project wouldn't go forward but for the investment, and it's therefore a net benefit to the community to get the tax revenue. So that's really where I was going with that particular comment, and I think that I can support the project on those grounds.
Okay,
I'm surprised, since you led the charge to reduce the ROI from 20% to 10% at the Housing Committee.
Martha did that, and I made it 10 years.
Might be too high. We've certainly been responsive to the market as things have changed.
Okay, anybody else have comment? Are we ready to vote? I will call the roll on the resolution. Shauna Black.
No.
Jeff Gorski abstains. Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Todd Brewer.
No.
John Guttridge.
Yes.
Faith Vavra.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, and I believe that's 4-2 with one abstention. Okay. Next item is NSF Enfield Solar 123 STE and pilot extension request.
You skipped Gateway.
Oh, Gateway Lofts, sorry.
I mean, I think you might actually need to from a parliamentary perspective.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like you should actually come
and say, and then.
state your conflict. Okay.
Okay, sorry, Gateway Lofts, I did skip over, sorry about that for us. We don't want to forget you here. We have a resolution for Gateway Lofts, let's see on page 10. Could I get a motion to put it on the floor? Mike Sigler moves. Do I have a second? Are we going to lack a second? Oh, Faith seconds. Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
You left me hanging. All right. And Heather, do you want to introduce this project?
This project was introduced and presented last month. Application was accepted. This is the first commercial office renovation, adaptive reuse to residential housing, 46 units in a building near and dear to my heart, as my office was located there for several years. New highest and best use for this property. You have in your application the authorizing resolution, as well as the public hearing notice and the public hearing minutes.
Is there questions, comments? Shauna.
Yeah, and I know we discussed this last meeting. I just don't remember the answer. Can we discuss how much the rents are going to go for?
I believe
What
we
the range
certainly
was?
can. We have representative from the developer here.
Yeah, Frost Travis is here. I would say that this one did not come in under financial needs, so there was not a review of the financials. They've requested the as of right 7-year incentive that they are eligible for.
But certainly, if you wanted to get that information, I don't see any problem with asking.
To answer the question, the rental rates are going to be $45 a foot, which is comparable to the building next door, Gateway Commons, also our building. So 3,000 plus. It is an adaptive reuse. It's also a mixed use project. Right now we have 2 tenants on the ground floor. So those two rents don't begin to cover our current tax bill. So we need to do something.
Anything further, Shauna?
No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay.
What was the, how much is the pilot on this? I'm looking for.
Yeah, it's in, I think it's on page 13. Yeah, Heather, we have a question from Todd on what is the actual pilot. Do you want to speak to that?
It's a 7-year incentive that was presented in your application packet last month. The proposed new taxes paid 1.19 million and taxes abated 1.21. Total incentives roughly 8% of total project costs.
Okay. Again, if anybody wishes to speak to the project, I would take a turn, but I'd let anybody else go first. I will be voting in support of this adaptive reuse of this building. As Frost just shared with us, you know, he needs to make sure this is a going concern real estate project, and the need to turn it into housing seemed pretty apparent from his last visit with us. I think this is a good use. It will add housing. Again, it's market rate, and we need everything across the spectrum. I don't want to sound like a broken record, but I don't see any problem with supporting this. It doesn't detract from any of the projects we see coming forward that do have affordable housing elements in them. So all to the good in my mind, and I will be supporting.
A question, so will this project be owned by the developer? Is it going to be developed and sold? Is it?
It's going to be owned by the developers.
The developer? Okay.
Anything further from anybody? Are we ready to vote? All right, let me go to the resolution page. I'll call the roll. Shauna Black.
I'm going to say no.
Okay. Jeff Korski abstains. Mike Sigler.
Yes.
Todd Brewer.
No. I'm on the
John
fence.
Guttridge.
Yes.
Faith Vavra.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, so that's, I think, 4 yeses, 2 noes, and 1 abstention. So the resolution passes. Okay. All right, moving on. Now we get to NSF Enfield Solar 123 STE and pilot extension request. I believe that's on page 20 of our packet. Heather, do you want to introduce this?
Sure. So this is 3 community solar projects that were approved previously. They have yet to begin construction. And the way that we structure the pilots is that the first year of the pilot is the first year that the increase in value, that the improvement is completed, hits the tax roll, so that, you know, there's a benefit there. This project has not started construction. However, we did close on the pilot agreement, so they're asking that we extend the start date of the pilot agreement because it's currently vacant land, so there is no, I mean, the property taxes are much less. They are actively bidding the project, looking at starting construction next year. So this is their best guess at when the project will be completed. So we'd like to realign that pilot start date with when the project will be completed.
And I would just say for members of the public, this is something we often do when a project does not start on the original schedule, so that the incentives that we provide actually match up. That if we don't do this, we've significantly changed the incentive available to the project. John.
And just to clarify the timing here, so if we don't act today, they'll pay the county taxes and the municipal town tax in January at the pilot rate, which is essentially higher than the unimproved land rate. So we need to act either this month or next month in order for.
Well, and I would say that generally, legally, Russ, maybe you can jump in here, that legally we can't have a pilot that requires a payment that's higher than what they would pay under the actual valuation. So the county assessor's office will bill them based on what it's valued at anyway. So
Yeah,
they're just going to lose.
That's correct.
They're going to lose that year of incentive.
All this is really doing is delaying the commencement date of the incentives that were approved by the board based upon their construction schedule, which, as everyone knows, for most projects have had many issues. So all it does is delay the commencement date. They're going to continue to pay full taxes based upon the current assessed value of the unimproved land.
So essentially, if we do nothing today, or if we amend this today, that doesn't actually change what's going to happen in 2023. It's really a question of what happens at the other end of the pilot, whether they get all the way through the whole pilot period, right? So if
I'm not sure what you're asking, John. Honestly,
I guess where I'm going with this is they're still uncertain about their construction date. Do we want to wait to act until they are in the ground, considering that there's no change to the taxes that they'll pay next year anyway? These supply chain issues have been pernicious and ongoing, and who knows, maybe we'll be talking again next year.
Right.
If it's no different, I personally would just say let's wait until they're done and then do all this once rather than potentially amending and amending and amending. Well, they figure out where their panels are coming from. But, I mean, that's just my perspective.
That's to the board's discretion. I think the intent here is to, based upon the conversations that Heather and I have had with the developer, is that they're actively pursuing to get it done. And they want to delay the benefit period in year one versus coming back 3 years from now and dealing with it. And we may have to do that, who knows?
Jeff?
So I hear what John is saying on this. I don't think it's a heavy lift for us to just vote on it today. And if they need to come back to us in another year and quickly vote on it, so I'm certainly willing to support it today.
Okay. I see we have a member of the Enfield Town Board who wishes to make a comment.
Yes, Robert Lynch, Town Councilperson, Town of Enfield. We're well familiar with this Norbit project. Just wanted a point of information. Maybe they haven't put a lot of investment in this property, but they have begun construction. Shortly after the authorization, they came through and they subcontracted to a construction company, and they stripped the whole land of all the trees. It is a great concern to the people on the Enfield Town Board that they basically left the site all weedy and a moonscape. And I had to call the people at Norbit to ask them to take the logs out that were a traffic hazard because they were almost onto the road right of way. So they did begin some limited construction. And I would also inform you that tonight the Enfield Town Board will consider revisions to its solar law, which could impact this project. And I'll just leave it there. Any questions? That's fine.
Okay, thank you. All right, Shauna.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions. I know that Supervisor Stephanie Redmond came in, I don't know, it's probably 6 months ago, and talked about a project that happened in Enfield and that the community was not very happy over it. And I wanted to see if we had received any feedback about this proposed project.
I'm not aware of any. Heather?
I'm not aware of any. This body provides financial assistance, and it does not provide site plan approval. It does not have any control over construction, unfortunately. Those are local land use issues, and sometimes there's a little bit of tension between developers and municipalities, and I understand that, and this has come up at the IDA with other projects as well, on the front end and the back end, and the IDA really has no control over some of those land use issues.
Okay. Todd, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm curious, guys. I know I was against this in the beginning because we didn't have the support from the Enfield community. So I don't understand why, I don't know, they're claiming that they couldn't start the project in time, but like Mr. Lynch said, I got a friend that lives right by the project. He said, they clear cut everything right down, like Mr. Lynch said, and it's an eyesore. It's a big problem there for the people in the community. If they were able to do that, I don't understand why they couldn't do anything else with the project. I would be against giving them any kind of an extension on it. I mean, I was against the project in the first place. I think we got to hold them to the time limits.
Okay. Anybody else who wishes to be heard? John?
I'm just rereading the letter here, and it also mentions the sales tax abatement, which actually expires on December 31st of this year. So if we don't extend that, then if they do commence in first quarter of next year, I guess we would at least need to act before they start spending money, because they'll need an updated letter from us or something to.
Generally, the attorneys will administratively extend a sales tax abatement. Sales tax extension. They usually do them for a year, and construction projects go over a year, and they extend them, and it's administrative. So I would ask Russ what would happen on this one if it actually.
So John, to answer your question, what we've done, or this board has done, is when there's been a delay in a project, we've tried, and I think successfully come back to the board to have the board approve the sales tax exemption extension, kind of like the pilot issue that's here. So we try to, get it before the board.
Right. So I guess my point, though, is that they're potentially at risk of having to actually spend the sales tax on purchased materials if we don't act before they start purchasing those materials after December 31st, right? So that's just worth noting, because it's in conflict with what I said earlier.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, I guess I will come in with a comment. We have done this in other projects where construction schedules got delayed. I don't see this as really controversial. And if we don't do it, we will have really changed the nature of the promises we made on this project, and I'm uncomfortable with that. So I will support the request. To the point of the town of Enfield initially did send us a letter of support on this project. What they did, though, is they said they wanted us to consider other requirements for the developer that we really weren't in a position to consider. And I think that's been the sticking point with the town of Enfield. I think we have to be much more careful going forward when we receive an approval letter that says, but we'd like something else. And in that case, there was a community development agreement they were hoping to get from the developer that really didn't materialize. And I think they were wishing to have a reduction in the pilot, reduction in the pilot from the town tax standpoint, but leave the school and the county with the full pilot. And that's a slippery slope we didn't want to go down. But here we are. I'm going to vote in favor of the resolution. I do have a question for Russ. We have 3 resolutions. Can we vote on them in one?
Yes.
And I also note on page 25 of the packet, NSF Enfield Site 2, down in the body, the second full paragraph, it says NSF Enfield Site 1, and I assume that's intended to be 2. So we should probably...
we could, that's a clerical error. We could fix that.
Okay. With that correction, I would entertain a motion to put these on the floor, all 3. Jeff moves, John seconds. Further discussion? All right, I will call the roll. Shauna Black.
Yes.
Jeff Gorski.
Yes.
Mike Sigler.
No.
Todd Brewer.
No.
John Guttridge.
Yes.
Faith Vavra.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So those pass. Our next item is 132 Cherry Clinton LLC, the Hive application. Heather, would you like to introduce this for us?
Sure. So you have before you a cover letter, an application packet, my benefits memo, and the cost-benefit calculator that we started using this year. I'm just looking for them. Sorry.
Actually, Heather, before you begin your discussion, I did want to put something on the record that I own a parcel of property down the street and around the corner from this parcel. But I do own a commercial property in the general neighborhood where this development would take place. I have no financial interest at all, but I did want to make that clear to everybody.
Yeah, there's no conflict there.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Heather, I interrupted you.
All right, sorry. Community benefits memo. This project, I'm going to let Todd Fox and his team talk about the particulars of the project, and I will just talk about the incentive level. So this project goes back several years. The CTAP boundary was once the 22 blocks of the downtown density district in the city of Ithaca, and then the city and Ithaca and the IDA partnered together since 2020, really, to have this downtown density policy to encourage density downtown and more development downtown. And then over the years, what happened is that the city put in place neighborhood plans. They did neighborhood planning. They updated the zoning. They updated their comprehensive plan. Once they updated their zoning on the west end, the waterfront, and Inlet Island all the way down Cherry Street to Cecil Malone, to encourage more neighborhood scale, mixed use, and waterfront activated development, including housing. So as they did that, those discussions between the city and the county's IDA were that we should extend the CTAP density district to include the waterfront, the west end, and the inlet on Cherry Street up to Cecil Malone, to be coterminous with where all that property was upzoned for mixed-use multi-story development. So myself and city staff at the time put together a proposal to Common Council to extend that boundary. And this took, there was much back and forth between the city and staff and my office and questions between the city. This went on for probably about a year as we were trying to be really intentional about the expanded boundaries. We made a proposal to Common Council. During this time, it was Todd Fox that came and talked to Jen Kushner in the city, talked to me. As you may recall, there used to be a two-step process with CTAP where you had to apply through the city first. There were a number of conversations with Todd. He was thinking about buying this property and redeveloping it. It was an underutilized parcel in what had now been upzoned for residential. So there were initial conversations over a period of several months as he thought about buying this property. And Jennifer and I both said, well, yeah, we're making a proposal to Common Council. We think that they're going to include extend the density boundary to include where it's all been upzoned. We went to Common Council several months later, and on the floor at council, a council member said, we probably don't need to provide incentives on Cherry Street. Residential is going to happen down there. So the boundaries were extended to include the waterfront and the west end, but not Cherry Street, even though it had also been upzoned and zoned for residential. So a little bit of time passed, and Todd has now put his project together and he's ready to develop, and he called me and I said, oops, I'm so sorry, you're right outside of the density district. So we had this conversation and I said, I think that we should bring it to the IDA and ask if they will consider a deviation from their standard policy in order to support housing development down here. I have reviewed the financials on this project. You'll get a memo should the project move forward before it is approved. And I have over time seen the return on investment. I have seen the cash available for distribution go down quite significantly on every project that I have seen. This is, I can say, is the lowest that I have seen. So I would say that there is financial need on this project. Part of that financial need is the construction. I had Charlie Troutman, an engineer, tell me at one point that all that land down there is like baby poop. It's mushy and it's really hard to get a foundation going down there, particularly to support height. We had a project with Emmy's Organics where they invested over $60,000 and then decided they were not going to be able to get a foundation that was going to meet their needs in a timely fashion, and they moved somewhere else. So just a little bit of background on CTAP and why I've brought this project to the IDA to consider as a deviation from its policy. It is right adjacent to that CTAP boundary, and there was some level of expectation over a period of time that these properties down here would be in the boundary. I will also say that this IDA has historically deviated from its standard policies to provide property tax incentives for affordable housing projects. There is one right next door, the Art House project, that the IDA did deliver an incentive to. So I'm going to invite Todd to the table, and his colleague Laura Matos is on Zoom with us today to talk more about the project.
Welcome.
Thank you for having us. So yeah, as Heather had mentioned, when we were first looking at this, purchasing this property, I had met with Joanne Cornish, I had met with Heather. We were kind of under the assumption that this was going to fall within, the CTAP boundaries. We moved forward with the purchase. I never got word that they didn't include this in the boundaries, and we'd spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on architectural fees, engineering fees, kind of move the project forward. And then when we reached out to Heather, that's when she said, "Oh yeah, no, this is actually a few blocks outside of the designated area." We knew when we first approached the project that it would be impossible to actually build this thing without a tax abatement. Just knowing the cost of construction, we did soil samples, and yeah, you have to go 100 feet down with piles in order to have a foundation for the project, and that adds millions of dollars of costs. It's also a part of town where there's not a lot of housing, so there's a lot of risk, kind of being a first mover. It's not like going on the commons where people want to live. You kind of have to build the neighborhood up as you go along. So, that added a ton of extra risk. That meant that we'd be, charging, I think we're 10% lower than new buildings that are getting built. Purposely we have to kind of price the project below what new construction projects are getting built at in order to, I think, entice people to kind of come to the neighborhood. But, we really looked at the long-term vision of the area. I own a total of 11 acres down there, and this was kind of like a legacy project for me to have the opportunity to actually build out a whole neighborhood instead of just putting one random building. It's like this something that we could do over the next 15 years and actually like really transform this area of Ithaca. But there's a ton of risk with having the first building going down there. Art House is great. It's an affordable housing project, so it's kind of a different animal. So, doing market rate, again, I mean, we're taking on a huge burden, a ton of risk to do this, and really the only way to make it work is with tax abatements. I mean, it's impossible to do otherwise. So, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the backstory on how we got here. We think it's an amazing project. We worked with some really great architects. We feel like, the building itself, it would be a really beautiful addition to Ithaca as a whole. It's, I think, perfectly located in terms of walkability. You have the bus route there. You have Wegmans, which is right there. So, you can entice a lot of people that don't have automobiles or don't want to have automobiles. So I think, sorry, yeah. I hear myself a lot better probably than everybody else
Give
hears.
us an overview of the project.
Yeah, absolutely. So we, it's two separate buildings. It's approximately 175,000 square feet of new construction. The total cost of the project is around $52 million, so it's a large investment. I think we have 143 units. We have approximately 5,000 square feet of retail space on the ground floor. There's also ground floor parking, which I believe is about 43 covered parking spaces. I think we're projecting to create about 100 construction jobs, give or take, approximately 3 permanent jobs once the building is complete. Let's see, what else? We have a bunch of amenity space. We're also, we have a space, this was kind of like we were working with Sam from the Cherry Arts, and one of the things that they really wanted to see was an art space. So we have like a retail space for artists, which we're gonna offer at a discounted rate. So I think that was something that was kind of a nice benefit. Trying to think.
If I may add, Todd, one thing that I feel like is also really interesting for the city, early on in the design of the project, we proactively reached out to TCAT and discussed the bus stop in front of the property because the connection to the neighborhood wasn't ideal before. And that's what you see in this image. We were able to talk with the city engineers, TCAT, and we will have that bus stop in front of the property, which I think would be a great addition, not just for this property, but for the neighboring, and also with the new pedestrian bridge over the water connecting to the trails. I think it would be a very multimodal transportation neighborhood.
Okay. Jeff.
So Todd, in your thing, can you talk about the energy efficiency of the building, and so if you can address that and kind of what that means for this building? And Heather, I noticed in the letter there it talks about the enhanced energy abatement. So what does that mean as part of what we're going to be? I'd love to hear about the stuff that's going on with the building.
So I am proposing the enhanced energy incentive. The IDA's enhanced energy incentive policy was put in place to incentivize projects to do more than what code requires, to be more energy efficient and more reliant on renewable energy sources. And it actually became the basis for the city's green building policy and their stretch code. So what the IDA's policy does is they say, okay, if you're going to meet the next step of the code, not today's code, but the next step, we will provide additional incentive. We had worked with Tatum Engineering to develop that policy based on, a pretty good guesstimate of the additional cost to meet those additional requirements. So this project, I'll let Todd talk to what some of the individual actions are in the property that contribute to the energy incentive, but they have pledged that they will meet the next step in the code in order to receive that additional enhanced energy incentive.
Sorry, maybe I missed it. Is it in here that, how much was it? The enhanced credit?
I just provided the spread of the proposed incentive with the finance.
Buried in that.
It is usually the amount abated and the amount paid are about equal. And with this, my get on the top, off the top of my head, I want to say it's about $1.5 million, $2 million more than what would have been provided otherwise.
And Heather, to clarify, that's because we go from 1 year at 100 to 2 years at 100. That's
Yes.
really how that's
For a multifamily project, there's 2 years. For industrial, I think it's 3 years.
Yeah, so as Heather mentioned, our engineers were looking at, how to make the building as energy efficient as possible. That was kind of just one of the goals that we wanted to have in general for for our projects going forward. If it was something that was possible, we wanted to try to attain it. It's kind of the standard stuff. It's 100% electric. There's mini split air source heat pumps. There's air source heat pumps for the water heaters. Things that you normally don't see in the buildings. It's just higher energy standard. You look at like the window to wall ratio, the amount of insulation, that's in the wall cavities and the ceilings. I could get more granular information. That's kind of like a broad overview, but I could kind of, after this meeting, provide more details that I think would kind of help outline that a little bit better.
I think you got more points on the stretch code too because it's walkable.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Todd.
Hey, Todd, when you mentioned your vision for this project, like a legacy, so is this something you plan on keeping, this project?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's gonna be
Yeah. So I don't know if you know my background, but born and raised in Ithaca. I've got 3 kids here, and my youngest is 6, so I'm not going anywhere anytime soon. But yeah, no, I have sold projects in Ithaca before, but there was kind of extenuating circumstances around those sales. When I looked at this project, like I said, this was kind of like a legacy. It was like, all right, this is something that I could build out, create this really great vision, make an actual impact on the community, and by creating this neighborhood. And it's something, the only way that really works is by holding on to the assets. So, that was my goal, absolutely.
You have your hands full with that place across the road.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my spreadsheet, and the additional incentive amount is about $1.2 million.
Okay, John.
So just two points of clarification. One, that because of the enhanced energy code, this building will not have natural gas in it. Is that correct?
Oh, yes, correct. It's 100% electric.
And then the other is that you intend to pay the IDA housing fee at closing in accordance with our policy?
Correct. I think it was $715,000.
Yeah, excellent. That's huge. Thank you.
Maybe 719, but it's a big number.
Yeah.
Mike.
Well, I've got 3 things, and I'll try to phrase them as questions. The one is, I brought up this point when when the State Street project was approved, where Mimi's used to be. And it was basically that they wanted to pay into the system because they didn't want to have affordable housing. They didn't want that 20%. But the point I brought up to them is the same point I'll bring up to you. This is kind of where you'd want affordable housing. It's near, you can walk to the grocery store, you can walk on, every reason you put it, accessibility is why you'd want affordable housing there. And frankly, if you're not building it, then who's building it? And I'm sorry if that's more of a statement than a question. But.
No. I'm glad you brought it up. We have a project right across the street because like I said, I own 11 acres, where we're going to be proposing approximately 200 affordable housing units using the 4% LIHTC program. So, that is also a component of the neighborhood. We wanted to create a diverse neighborhood where, you kind of have all elements, different socioeconomic age groups. So we are going to be proposing something in the next couple of months, hopefully. So.
That's great. No, so you're looking at it really more as a neighborhood than as a building.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, your reputation's actually very good. So.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
My other question, Art House has had significant problems. Now, this is obviously market rate, but still, it's more of a problem with the neighborhood. I'm looking at where you want to build this on the map, and besides the building issues, the one homeless encampment is right there, and I I would assume that's going to regain.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's question number 2, which is not more of a question. I mean, how do you approach this?
Yeah, no, we're definitely concerned about it. And, you know, Art House has definitely had a lot of problems. Our office is actually down there, so I'm down there every single day. And ever since Art House opened up, it's definitely changed. And I don't think that has anything to do, obviously, with affordable housing. I think it just has to do with management. And, you know, we've had conversations with the management team. I think they're doing everything they can to turn it around. You know, I think part of the problem is when you have a bunch of bad tenants, it you know, tarnishes the entire building. But there's also a lot of really good tenants in there. So I'm hopeful that, you know, by the time that our building is built in the next, like, you know, 18 months, 24 months, that the management will have made a huge impact on the existing residents. And I'm really hopeful that the city is going to come up with a comprehensive plan for the homeless situation in Ithaca. You know, it's something that's desperately needed. And, you know, I'm again hoping that within the next, you know, 18 to 24 months that there's something in place to help people with transitional housing, to help people with, you know, the needs and services that are desperately, you know, needed right now. So, but it's a concern. But I also think that, you know, as you create more density, I think it naturally kind of helps with those issues. You know, you have more people that are there, you have more eyes that are in the community. It creates more safety. I think it prevents like certain vandalism from happening. You know, we had our offices broken into and we had several $1,000s worth of our stuff stolen. You know, but if you have more people living in the neighborhood and you have, you know, windows with lights on and people that can see, I think it's a natural deterrent. So I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic.
Okay. By the way, I stand corrected. It was 7:15. You're right. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you have more, Mike?
Just last question. So, I mean, I would hope you'd go and get from the city some commitments on that, on security and stuff. My other thing I would maybe want to get some commitment from the city on is just how you get in and out of these projects. I mean, I'm looking at it on the map again. I mean, you've got Cecil Malone, which comes in off of 13, and then you have the other big, you know, 96. But that's like it, and 96 is already a mess. And that Cecil Malone with the light, I mean, that's not terrific either. So, I mean, I don't know. I just, you know, that's 143 units, then you're going to put another 200 units on top of the Art House units that are already there. It just, while I want to see that neighborhood developed, I don't know how you kind of get in and out of this place.
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good concern. We're doing a comprehensive study that the city is going to require for all the future developments. So this is small enough where it really doesn't make that much of an impact. But, you know, if you add the stuff that we want to add down there, you know, you do have to start doing like traffic studies and analysis and try to figure out maybe some sort of new entry or exit point into the neighborhood. So the city is actually going to require us, when we propose the affordable housing project, to start actually looking at that stuff in greater detail.
I mean, you do have floral right on the other side.
The environmental review was done on this project. They did receive a negative declaration of environmental significance, which is required. I mean, seeker needs to be done before the IDA can make any decisions. So they didn't require a traffic study for this project. They didn't find the level of increase in traffic to be such that they required it here.
Correct. Yep.
And if I may add one more thing, another conversation we've been having with the city engineers is about the bike lane. So you can see in this image in blue, they are working on that, which I think will also add additional levels of ways to get into the neighborhood. We have a very big bike room into this property because also we are close to the new pedestrian bridge, which will connect to the trail. So we hope that, especially this area of the city, that it's not full of hills, will allow people to use different ways of transportation, public transportation, bikes, and all the stuff.
Okay. John, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, so because of the variation from our policy on this one, are we going to be requesting a letter of support from the city before our final approval, or?
The only reason that I requested a letter of support for the Cliff Street retreat was because it was a commercial retail project, which our UTEP does say that. However, there hasn't, our UTEP is silent on letters of support for projects that are deviations from our standard policy. So I hadn't planned on requesting one. I mean, I could if the IDA wants.
I mean, I think it would be good for, like, I guess, sort of coming back to my previous concern about, the last project. I mean, I can see supporting this for a variety of reasons. It's a great project in a great location, and I think that, it's putting a market rate building right next to an affordable building that are very similar in scale is a great way to create that integrated neighborhood that Mike's talking about. And, the affordable housing's already gone first, all the transportation benefits, et cetera. But I also think that, there is risk that we'll end up incentivizing just any housing project anywhere. And, for market rate, I do kind of struggle with that. I think I'd like to see us to come up with some kind of either, amendment to our policy or some kind of a process by which we decide which ones do and don't, get incentivized.
Okay.
So, I don't know what to say.
John, thank you for asking that question, because I was going to ask that as well. I think it would be helpful to us to get a clear statement from the city in support of this, certainly for me. Okay, further questions, comments? Right.
Yeah, I think it'd be a great project you got planned there, Todd. And I'm also concerned about because I know I don't want to be a hypocrite. I know the one I voted no on because it's outside this CTAP boundaries. So that's my only concern and I feel bad because you bought that land and 2 blocks away. But as much as I'd like to see you do this, that's the thing I'm hung up on.
Yeah, and I don't want to misspeak, but my understanding too, and maybe you can correct me on this, was part of the reason that this area wasn't included was because a lot of it is industrial, and industrial automatically qualifies. So they were like, oh, we don't need to draw the boundaries, and it kind of felt like the fact that it was upzoned for housing was almost kind of forgotten about. But there was, I do remember at one of the meetings there was talk about, do we include all of Cherry Street in it, and the consensus was, oh, we don't need to because everything automatically qualifies. So there was intention or discussion on doing that, but then it didn't seem like it was necessary. But again, I think like the housing kind of got forgotten about. So yeah, just wanted to add that caveat.
Hey, Mike.
I just wanted to make last comment, really. And I'm just going to throw this out there at you. When they built the project over, the new waterfront project over by the golf course, we let them kind of pull that out. But part of the trade-off was, in part, because they just had so much public good there. Like they were putting in a ramp to launch, boats. They were going to put in this promenade. I'm assuming they still are. This promenade for public use, and there was like a lot of public use there. I'm not saying that this project has to have that, but I'll mention it now.
Yeah.
As you develop.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that. I think part of the issue is the land is owned by like the Army Corps of Engineers because it's the flood control channel. So I think it's a little bit different circumstances, but I can definitely look into that further and see if there is any options there. But yeah.
I'm just, like I said, I'll throw it out now.
Yeah.
As opposed to.
Okay.
So I know you provided me with this presentation. Did you want me to advance it, or you tell me, I'll drive the bus?
Yeah, no, we would definitely love for, everything to get advanced. We do have final site plan approval from the city. We're ready to kind of move the project forward at this point. And, without this, we're never going to get lending from a bank. So this is kind of like the linchpin in whether we're moving forward or not.
Okay. I think we're very close to getting a motion to send this to public hearing, but John, did you have further comment?
No, I was just going to actually provide that motion, so
okay.
I will move to send this to a public hearing.
And Todd seconds?
And also request that, can you email us the presentation deck?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, but, so we have a motion on the floor. Any further comments, questions on the motion? All right, I'll call the roll. Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so that'll go to a public hearing. All right.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
And we approve the video conference policy. I have no chair's report for the IDA. Is there a staff report, Heather?
I have a staff report. The BVSHF project and the parking lot at 401 East State Street behind Gateway. Maybe some of you have seen that they have gone back to the city for a variance for an additional floor to make the financial numbers work on this project. It's been on hold since the beginning of 2022. So I've had a couple of conversations with the developer, and we're just waiting to see what the city's going to do, and he'll determine how many units he can have and what his new costs are, and if there's a significant change in the project, it will have to come back to the IDA. So I just want to put that on your radar. The City Harbor project, they have tentatively scheduled a closing for February, so their plan is to be in construction in the spring. So that is moving forward as far as we know today. I have started to talk to the South Works. It was formerly called the Chain Works District project, about some sort of a property tax incentive for that parcel. They are scheduled to close on 98 acres with over 850,000 square feet of vacant manufacturing space on December 8th. So some discussions have happened back and forth, and that should be coming forward. The Yellow Barn Solar Project, which is the first industrial scale solar project in Tompkins County, 160 megawatts of solar in the towns of Lansing and Groton, is starting to go through the state's approval and siting process. The first step is to have a community, I can't remember what they call it, stakeholders meeting. So the town of Lansing, the town of Groton, and some other entities have been invited to an initial meeting. I believe it's next week. I will be at that meeting. They will be trying to work towards approval over the next 18 months with the state. So that's going to be a little bit further out on the horizon. Tomorrow I will be in Utica all day at the semi-annual IDA Academy meetings with all of my counterparts from throughout the state. And I wanted to just notify that, you know, as sort of a matter of course in terms of housing, I've been involved with housing and affordable housing since before I came to Ithaca. It was the thing I did here before I did economic development. And so I've had a lot of conversations with developers, with municipalities about supporting more housing development in the community based on our housing needs assessment. And the housing committee met, the IDA's housing committee met earlier this year, late last year, and there were some discussions with the county planning department about potentially proposing to increase the boundaries or increase the areas with which the IDA would deliver an incentive for mixed-use multi-story housing. It only works at scale. Like, you really can't abate $2,000 a year in property taxes. We looked at it, we talked to the county's planning department with the committee, and the county's planning department sort of said, the only places where you'd really probably see that kind of density would be College Town, which we probably don't want to deliver incentives to student housing, or in the urbanized development focus area that they've identified. Not all the development focus areas, because those include some of the villages and further out places that you just really wouldn't see the density of housing that the IDA would be looking at providing an incentive for. The committee decided at the time to sort of let's maybe have some individual conversations between the county planning department, between me at IAED, about whether they would be interested in doing this kind of thing, to expand the boundaries, deliver some sort of incentive through the IDA. The County Planning Department and I did have a meeting several months ago with the town and village of Dryden, and really sort of solidified that they might not have enough density out there. However, we did just recently have a meeting with the town of Ithaca, and they're really interested in a little bit more density in new neighborhoods, particularly up on South Hill, past Ithaca College, and said, yeah, could we talk more about trying one, or if there's a developer that might be interested, if it is, mixed-use, multi-story housing. So, potentially more to come on that. I think it's, a little bit down the road, but I wanted everyone to know that we're continuing to have these conversations with municipalities where appropriate, and, there will be more, and probably through the Housing Committee when there's more to share. And that's it for my report, unless there's any questions.
Questions, comments? Okay. I see we have informational minutes from the Governance Committee, but we do have minutes from October 12th, 2022. I'd entertain a motion to approve those. Mike moves, Jeff seconds. Thank you. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Shauna?
I'd like to vote for him. Yep.
Oh,
Are you doing
I was
roll
calling the
call?
vote. Calling
Okay,
the vote.
yes.
Mike, sorry. Mike?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So those are approved. And I see we have an executive session on the agenda.
We do, we're past 4.
Well, what's the pleasure of the board?
So let's continue personally.
Yeah, okay. Could I get a motion to go into executive session? Jeff? John seconds. All those in favor? Sean?
Yep.
Mike?
Do we need to state our purpose before?
Oh, right.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rich, that's right, John.
Yeah,
We get-
sorry.
State our purpose.
Yeah.
What is our purpose?
Heather? Do you want to state the purpose for executive session?
Oh, to talk about potential legal lawsuit.
And pending litigation?
Pending litigation.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right,
Thank you.
excellent.
Okay.
Okay, so, yeah.
I will call the roll again. Shauna?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
John?
Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Jeff?
Yes.
Faith?
Yes.
Todd?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. All right, so we'll take a minute to shut down the recording.
Not me being sued. I think I'll take my leave here now.